Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our Big 12 football predictions today with our next team, the TCU Horned Frogs. So TCU started off last season at number 13 in the country, but ended up finishing 6-7 and losing the Liberty Bowl to Georgia. So a very disappointing season for TCU that was hoping with a very experienced offense to maybe compete in that Big 12 last season. Didn't work out, but this year they're even more experienced with 10 returning starters on offense and then 7 on defense. I think their offense could compete with Oklahoma State to be the best in the Big 12, and they're going to be extremely dangerous this season. So let's see how they're going to do. Opening up the season against Jackson State shouldn't be a problem for them at all. Like I said, Gary Patterson returns one of the most experienced teams in the country with those 17 starters. And as I said, on offense, I'm very excited to watch the combination of Kenny Hill, Kyle Hicks, and Kavontae Turpin. Those three are going to make up the bulk of their offense. And I'm very excited to watch them and see how they do this season. They're going to be very explosive. So if a team does not have a very strong defense, they could be in for some trouble. But obviously no problem for Jackson State there, or TCU against Jackson State. And they travel to Arkansas. If anybody remembers that game from last year, second game of the season, Arkansas traveled down there, got up to a 20-7 lead, somewhat late in the game, third quarter, and then TCU battled back, took a 28-20 lead before Arkansas came back. It was such a wild ending. They ended up winning the game in 2 overtimes, 41-38, and that kind of was the beginning of the end for TCU that season. It kind of really, I think, just that devastating loss kind of hurt them. Exposed some weaknesses, and that obviously led to a 6-7 record. Not saying that that loss to Arkansas was the reason for their poor success last season, but I think it did play a big factor. This season they have to travel to Arkansas, a team I'm very interested to watch in the SEC this season, led by probably one of the better quarterbacks in that conference, Austin Allen. Right now, I'm going to give TCU a loss to the Razorbacks. I don't like it being on the road in Arkansas, despite what a lot of people think. I think they could be a little bit of a surprise team in the SEC. They do return, like I said, Austin Allen at quarterback. Devwah Whaley should not be bad at running back, I know, since Raleigh Williams retired. They have a somewhat experienced receiving core. They lost a lot of people, but those junior college transfers should be big, and then the offensive line is going to be improved. And if their 3-4 defense works out well, I think they'll be able to compete against this TCU team. So we'll have to see how that one goes. I can see it being very similar to another double overtime game, a big thriller up in Fayetteville this season. I just don't think TCU will be able to pull it out. Then SMU, a team that's rising in the American Athletic Conference. Chad Morris, their head coach, is doing a great job there. He's building something. I expect him to get SMU back to a bowl game for the first time since 2012, but I do not expect them to be able to go on the road and defeat TCU. And then Oklahoma State, expect tons of offense in this one. As you saw in my Oklahoma State video, I said this repeatedly. This is going to be a very fun one to watch. Kenny Hill versus Mason Rudolph. And like I said, very explosive offenses on both sides. But in my Oklahoma State video, I said this game could come down to quarterback play, who makes the best decisions, and who plays better. And I'm going to give that to Mason Rudolph of Oklahoma State. I think TCU loses this one as well. And a lot of factors play into that. I feel like Oklahoma State, just on both sides of the ball, is going to be a little more talented. With it being on the road, that does hurt TCU a little bit. Not saying they can't beat the Cowboys, but not too high on that game right now. So a 2-2 start, not the exact kind of start they wanted, but the schedule does get a little easier as we go on. Bye week after a 2-2 start is going to be good, especially coming off a loss. Get West Virginia at home. New quarterback Will Greer. Think their 7 stars on defense should be able to rattle him a little bit. And West Virginia's defense is very young, not very experienced, so hopefully TCU's offense can run all over them. And I think they'll get the win over West Virginia. And then at Kansas State, a potential trap game. Anytime someone travels to Kansas State or plays Kansas State in the Big 12, it could be a trap game because Bill Snyder has a little something up his sleeve this season. I could see them being a potential Big 12 title contender. They have 8 starters returning on offense, led by Jesse Ertz, that dual threat quarterback there. So you could see a lot more offensive fireworks in this game too. But for right now, I'm going to give TCU the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to give them the win over Kansas State on the road. And then Kansas, we all know a team that has struggled lately. They gave TCU a little bit of a scare last year when TCU traveled to Kansas. Don't expect that to happen this year with the game being played at TCU. Now I'm going to give the Horned Frogs another win. So 3-game win streak. At Iowa State, another very tough place to play in the Big 12. As we all know, we've seen them upset a few teams there or give some teams some scares. Iowa State will eventually get there, back to a bowl game. I think they're still in for another rough year this season. and I'm going to give TCU another win on the road. Could be close. Don't be surprised if it's a little closer than it should be, but I do expect TCU to get the win. Shouldn't be too big of an issue. And then Texas, another team that is on the rise, led by Tom Herman. He's coming into his first year there. A team I expect to do much better than they did under Charlie Strong these past few years. He's going to really turn this program around, and Texas returns, I think, 17 starters themselves. So they're going to be very dangerous. But TCU gets them at home. And with a first-year head coach, I don't expect Texas to win the Big 12 or anything. They'll still be competitive, but I'm going to give TCU the win. And then at Oklahoma. Unfortunately for TCU, they draw the top two dogs in the Big 12, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, on the road. Now, I think that's really going to hurt them in their chances to play for that Big 12 title. If they can upset one of those, because their other loss is at Arkansas, that's non-conference. If they can upset Oklahoma State or Oklahoma, they could see themselves in that title game. But right now, I'm actually going to predict another loss for them at Oklahoma, led by Baker Mayfield. I think he's probably the best quarterback in the conference right now. It's a competition between him and Mason Rudolph, in my opinion. With it being on the road and with Oklahoma potentially playing for a college football playoff berth at this point, I think the Sooners are going to be too hyped up, and I think they're going to get the win over the Horned Frogs. Texas Tech, a team that could also have a lot of offense, but I think this game will come down to who has the better defense, and that's going to be TCU by far. I think Texas Tech has really struggled on the defensive side of the ball, allowing tons of points last season, as we've seen, and I think they're going to get a win over the Red Raiders. And then closing out the season against Baylor, a team that really ruined TCU's national championship hopes back in 2014 in that thriller. So it's become a pretty big rivalry now in the Big 12. Baylor should be rebuilding now that Matt Rule is there. And I think that he's going to end up getting Baylor back to where they were a couple of years ago under Art Briles. But it's going to be a rebuilding season for them. Probably 6-6, 7-5, somewhere around there. TCU will get the win at home. Not easily, but comfortably. And that'll be the key. And that's going to leave TCU, in my opinion, with a 9-3 record, which is not bad for a team that went 6-6 in the regular season last year. Their offense is much more experienced, along with their defense. They are in the top 5 teams in terms of experience this season, top 5 teams in the country in experience. And like I said, if they can upset an Oklahoma State or Oklahoma, you could see the TCU Horned Frogs playing in that Big 12 title game. So I'm very excited to watch them this season. Very curious to see how their offense does. I know they're going to be very explosive, probably going to put up tons of points. So if a team has a weak defense, they're in for a very rough Saturday night against TCU. So keep an eye on the Horned Frogs this season, because they could not necessarily surprise a lot of people, but because I think it's going to be expected for their offense to be good. I think people aren't going to let them slide. Any team coached by Gary Patterson should not be slept on. So keep an eye on those Horned Frogs this season in the Big 12. Now, please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and please continue to share our videos. We're going to continue our Big 12 football predictions, and we'll see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.